Hey, what's up, brother? Welcome to today's video. Jordan here. We're going to talk about loneliness for the modern man in the modern age, in this strange world that we live in, where a lot of things are online. And this is going to be specifically relevant to you if you are in the pursuit or already established in building a life for yourself that is more based online. So, whether that's remote sales, whether that's building an online business, maybe it's an established business that you're running, and maybe you've been traveling for some time, whatever the case is. Loneliness is a big topic that comes up for many men, me included, on this journey. Over the last, couple of years or so, I've traveled to over 13 countries, I think, over the last maybe year and a half or 2 years or so. Not sure the exact numbers, but it's been quite a few. Some of those were with people, which was amazing. And some of those have been solo, which have also been amazing. But there's been a lot of challenges that arose with that as well. And in a group coaching call yesterday with a group of guys who are pursuing high ticket sales, some of them established, some of them still getting started, there was a big topic that came up around loneliness, around finding your tribe when everything is based online. And I can completely resonate with the journey of what that's like and how really that can affect your mental health as well. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to discuss really what's going on within the world, how to navigate these challenges, especially when you're pursuing something that's different to the traditional path of, stay in your local place, get a job, go to college, have a family, and go that path. You're probably looking at things from a different perspective, a different lens, and creating more freedom for yourself if this is going to be something that you resonate with, right? So let's dive into it. The first thing we really want to look at is how things have changed over the last number of years, right? If we think about the way life was before the massive influx of social media and then the internet and technology, things were very simple. Now, not saying that they were better or worse then, because again, everything is just the way that it is, right? We just have to adapt to these different things depending on the current situation that we're in within life. So we just have to become more adaptable. But when we look back into the times before social media, things were a little bit easier in terms of like building community, and it was a very natural part of life, right? You would grow up in the same place, you would make friends with the people around you, you would probably like some people, you would dislike other people, you would hang around with certain people, you would probably stay away from certain people as well. And it was this kind of little community, right? Regardless of who you were getting along with, you would probably start romantic relationships as well. And that would then lead you into the rest of your life. And life seemed pretty simple, right? I can't necessarily 100% relate to those times because I'm not that old, but I saw glimpses of this within my own life, especially when I was growing up within the community that I was in, which was in Ireland. And when I was going to university back, a number of years ago, back when I was 18, I left home and I didn't come back for like 5 or 6 years. I lived down in Cork City, where I went to college in Ireland, the south of Ireland. And that was a really, really expansive time for me, not necessarily because I was attending college. That was part of it. I mean, that was had its own benefits and had its own drawbacks as well. But the big part for me was the community aspect. So, of course, technology was a big part of our lives then. But for me, the big focus for me was always being, how can I get around more people? How can I socialize more? How can I just get out into the world? Because yes, Instagram and all these things were absolutely a thing, but I was always living with at least a minimum of 3 people, sometimes all the way up to 8 people in some cases for the full, time I was living in Cork City at the time. So I was always around people. Always. Like, there was never a moment where I wasn't. So again, that has its own set of drawbacks as well. So for me in those earlier years, the big focus for me was, how can I party more? How can I travel more? And how can I be around more people and socialize? And I think that has so many benefits that sometimes I start to realize that that's not really the case for many people, because, like, especially in this day and age, because I in myself didn't spend that much time, looking at how can I start a business online, like especially at the ages of 18, 19. My primary focus was travel and, again, being around people, having a good time. That was my primary focus. So that helps you, build a lot of social skills. But then as I started to get into more of the online business side of things and started to separate from the fact that, I'm not going to go the traditional route, the university for me was really just a place to socialize and to have fun and to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And somewhere along that way, I decided to pursue entrepreneurship as I came to a close within my college years. So then I just went straight into that. I never actually went straight into a traditional job, a 9 to 5 or anything like that. I had 9 to 5s, along the way, but I never had an office job or anything like that because I knew I was never going to do that. I just had to find a better way. So that led me to, pursue things online. Now, the reason I mentioned that is because when we look at the world today, it's more common than ever to be 18, 19, 20, or even much older, and to look around to see people making a lot of money online and to see people who are, again, doing well financially, but they are not living that same way, let's say in my case, that where they're spending a lot of time socializing. So therefore they are very stuck in front of their computer. There's a lot of time spent being, just behind the screen, and then you're learning from people online instead of actually learning in the real world. And that can have a lot of drawbacks because you can start to feel more disconnected than ever. So this is, I think, where the whole evolution of self-improvement really blew up because, again, back in 2020 when the whole world kind of shut down for a little bit, then many people went to online to get information, to start to learn about different things. And I think, that had its own benefits because a lot of people, like woke up to the truth of what was going on within that scenario. And again, that's a conversation for another day, but that helped a lot of people awaken within themselves, but that also led to everybody feeling connected over Zoom or connected over, just watching people online. And I don't think the world really recovered much from that. It's kind of created this big disconnection in the world. And that's a very, very big problem, especially when it comes to our own human nature and our own social needs. Because I'll even know for myself, when I started to go the path of, building in my online business and started to figure things out in that front, there was a point where I would make the transition from basically the crew and the community that I had in those college years into this gray period where I didn't necessarily relate to a lot of these people anymore. So I started to feel like, oh, I'm on my own journey, I'm going off and I'm doing this thing, and therefore I don't resonate with these people anymore. And again, I kind of cut off a lot of people. And I think that was more of my ego than anything else at the time, but I didn't really realize that. I just wanted to find my tribe of people who were doing similar things to me. But in where I was living in Ireland, especially when I was getting things up and off the ground, that didn't exist for me. So there was an incredible amount of loneliness that was starting to infiltrate my life, right? And I started to feel very separated from everyone around me. The only people I was really connected to were the people online. So that was a lot of my journey in those earlier stages. So I can completely resonate with feeling those times of just being on your own. Like that there's nobody who understands you. There's nobody who gets you. And I'll never forget, there was often times where I would be, doing the whole routine of waking up at 5 a.m. and working 12, 15 hours a day, just trying to like figure everything out and learn and study and do cold calls and to start to create opportunities for myself for the marketing agency that I was starting, creating content on TikTok. Like I was just doing all sorts of things. Now, there was a part of me that felt really fulfilled doing that because for the first time in my life, I felt like I had control over my life and I felt like I was going somewhere exciting. But at the end of the day, man, I would just be sitting there on my computer and I would, oftentimes have just tears in my eyes because I had nobody to talk to. I had nobody to turn to. And even inside some of the online communities that I was in, I would just sit there and I wouldn't necessarily understand how to really interact. And even if I did have a great interaction with people, or if there was, voice notes exchange or something, it would still feel a little bit hollow because there's a part of us in our human nature that loves being around people, right? Even if you're more introverted, like I would consider myself to be slightly more introverted, but I also love being around people, especially the right people, right? And that can be very energizing. So I felt a big disconnection there, which is why I then started to travel. But traveling actually made it worse in a lot of cases because now you're really focused on, okay, I need to go to a new, I'm going to go to a new place to find my crew of people. I'm going to see if I can find other people who are doing things online. And that's a challenging thing to do, because now you're someone who's moving to a new place, a new country, and maybe they don't speak English. Maybe, in my case, I was going to Portugal. There was a lot of people who spoke English, but Portuguese is still a very big thing there, obviously. So they encourage you to speak Portuguese. So I even went off and started to do Portuguese lessons with other people who were trying to learn it. So that was a good way to start, build a community. But, that had its own set of challenges, and I didn't really resonate with everybody who I was kind of surrounded by. But again, it was like I was just trying to figure things out. Now, the point being with this is that when you are going on this path of creating a life for yourself, and it's a little bit different to the traditional path, you're going off, you're doing things online, and, you're maybe stepping into travel more and doing these things, then there's a certain skill set that needs to be developed for you to be able to satisfy your own social needs, which is, to put it bluntly, putting yourself out into the world and challenging yourself in that way. Because we can feel very, very comfortable when we're sitting behind our computer and we have our work here, and it's easy to get things done, and we can watch videos and we can do these things. But that will only last so long before you really just start to feel like you're completely disconnected from the world. And that will affect how you show up in sales, in business, in whatever it is that you're pursuing or building. And that's a big factor that comes across in how you show up within the world. Especially if you're trying to get into like a relationship or experiment with things there as well. Like, I mean, nowadays there's so many apps for these different things, and it's all the same thing. It's like our soul craves connection at the end of the day, like deep, deep connection, to feel understood, to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel valued for who we are. And yes, that can come in group settings or one-to-one settings online, like I see it with my clients as well. But it really does come down to in-person connections, which is why I've made it a massive goal of mine to go to more things in person, especially with, a crew of people who I resonate with, that I, thankfully found over the last 2 years or so. Before then, for the first 2 or 3 years on my journey, I was just trying to figure things out, and it was a very, very lonely journey. Right. Like I said, I would finish the days and I would be stuck at my laptop, and I would be, doing all of the work. But the work didn't feel like a win, because I was still just going to get up and do the same thing tomorrow. But there was a part of me that was just kind of like broken a little bit, because I just wanted to be connected to people. And yeah, I went to digital nomad events, and I went to entrepreneurial events, and then I joined online communities, and anytime there was something in person, I would go and I would pay the price to get in the room, and I would do these things. And that took some time, because again, in this beginning stages, I didn't have a lot of money. So to get in the room with people was expensive. And until I was able to do that, it was very challenging. Like, I would go to free events, but I would, find myself trying to connect with other entrepreneurs, and then I would be speaking to people who are software engineers, right, who are just working online. So again, really cool people, really cool insights, and obviously we had a good conversation, but still felt a little bit like, I didn't really feel understood in any way, because the entrepreneurial path, especially if you want to go and do that path, whatever that looks like for you, it's the road less traveled, right? Let's just put it that way. And there's trade-offs to everything. But the skill and the real main thing that we got to get back to with all of these different things is to put ourselves out there in such a way where we are putting ourselves in scenarios where we can satisfy that social need, and really understand that that is a need. That's like a survival need, to be connected to people around you. So, I mentioned earlier in the video that, I had a cutoff point with a lot of the people I used to hang around with. You don't need to do that, right? I feel like that was just, again, like I said, a bit of my ego kind of coming in saying, hey, I'm on this new path, I'm on this new journey, I'm going to cut off everybody here. And, I guess there was benefits to that, but I definitely think that was just a part of my ego, just thinking that I was superior in some way, shape or form, which again, a natural part of the journey and a natural part of dissolving that is just, you walk the path and you realize, hey, that probably wasn't the best thing to do. So if you're somebody who still has connections back home, or connections to people who, yeah, they may not be doing the same things as you, but if they're there and they're good friends and they're good people to have around you, then yeah, go off and spend time with them, have a laugh, have fun. I think that we can get very serious very, very quickly about life, especially in, your early 20s or your later 20s, or even in your early 30s, and sometimes even 40s as well, where life becomes this very serious thing. Now, of course, you have a family and things like that down the line. That's that is a serious thing. But when you're in this phase of growing and building and, just figuring things out, which is really what your 20s are for, like that time can be fun as well, right? You can still pursue the goals that you have while also being connected socially and having fun at the weekend. Like obviously not going off and destroying your body and mind with alcohol or drugs or anything like that. That's not what we're saying here. But we're saying that there can be a balance because, a lot of the messages out there when it comes to the content that we consume is, hey, if you're on the path of growth, you need to just like isolate yourself. You need to separate yourself. You need to like run alone. You need to work alone. You need to do that phase like where you're just alone. And yes, there's truth to that, but there's truth to everything. But everything is a simple half truth, right? If we look at everything, there's always a positive and a negative to everything. So it's really about trying to find the balance for you and really trusting your own discernment with these things, right? If you don't necessarily resonate with a message, use your own discernment to see, is this something that resonates with me? If everybody's telling me just to simply work harder and to isolate myself and to go off into this world of like, I'm just on the grind, bro, like this kind of like grind set mentality, it's like, yeah, that can work for like a season to get yourself in gear and dial in some discipline and routine. Absolutely. I'm a huge advocate for that. But there's also a side to it that's very dangerous for your mental health. And it kind of sucks the fun out of life. It's almost a little bit too masculine, right? Because it's like you're so stuck in the structure and the discipline and the routine that life just becomes this gray zone of, for lack of a better term, just completely boring, right? Like some of my best weeks where I have the best coaching calls, where I sign the most clients, where I have the most successes are the weeks where I don't do the most work. They're the weeks where I spend time creating, videos like this that I really enjoy, speaking with the guys in my community, having one-on-one calls, but then also going out and meeting friends, right? And, speaking with people in person and just having a laugh, going to the beach and just not talking about business or just talking about life, and finding people who resonate with the stuff that you like to talk about and whatever that means for you. So there is a balance. I love to always come back to the middle way, right? It's like we get very caught up sometimes in binary thinking. Things have to be one way or have to be the other way. And yes, there's a caveat to all of this where it's like, if you're somebody who's like really struggling with discipline and really struggling with like taking the actions and moving forward, then yeah, maybe a little bit more discipline, a little bit more structure is actually a very beneficial thing. And that could be a couple of weeks where you're kind of dialing that in. But then it's also like not making that your identity. It's like coming back to the realization that, yeah, once you dial that in, it's okay to like loosen up a little bit and go have fun, and then dial in back where you are on this side so that you have that nice flow and structure. And that's easier said than done, don't get me wrong. And it's really coming back to trusting yourself in those times to be able to find what is the best way for you to operate within that way of being. But then if you're really, really structured all the time, then yeah, okay, if that works for you and you really enjoy that, then absolutely. Like, if you enjoy that in that season, amazing. I've had many months of that as well. But then it comes a time where I'm like, you know what, I'm kind of sick of this and it's not really serving me anymore. And that's where you just reevaluate. I'll never forget in 2024, a big part of my year was living in Vietnam, which I absolutely loved. It was such a fun time for me to create. A lot of my videos for YouTube were created there, and I got a lot of momentum in that phase of life. But I got to a point where it was August, and I was like, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of being here. I don't want to be here anymore. There wasn't many people around me. There was a couple of people I had connected with. I was also dating a woman over there as well, so there was like all of that going on. But then that ended up ending, and I ended up moving to Bali because I was like, okay, well, I want to be around more people. I want to like increase the community side of my life. So the interesting thing about life is that we're always kind of solving the next problem, and it is quite challenging to have all of your buckets full at all times, right? So social is great, and then business is great, or your income, growing your income is great. Then also health and fitness is great, and then you have like relationships, romantic relationships, friendships. Like there's so many things to juggle, and it's a balancing act. It really is. So it's about then checking in with yourself and saying, hey, like, what do I need right now? And actually asking yourself that question is such a simple thing, but it'll give you the answer that's right for you. not what someone else thinks that is the best way to do things, right? And that just comes with trusting yourself, right? Trusting yourself, allowing yourself to be seen by yourself as well, like seeing yourself for who you are, knowing what works for you, what doesn't, and knowing what season of life that you're in as well, what season of your business or, growing your income, whatever that looks like for you. All of these different things are very nuanced, and there's amazing content out there. There's amazing messages out there that are very positive, but not every piece of advice is the advice for you at your current time. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, especially for anything related to improvement or development, because until we learn to trust our own internal guidance system, our intuition, our own feeling of like understanding ourselves and knowing ourselves, until we get to that point, then we're going to feel like everything is for us all the time. And that's so overwhelming, right? Because there's generic messages out there that people just love to follow, like be disciplined. It's like, okay, well now then people start to identify that as like, hey, this is now my identity. And that can work again for the season that you're in, but it then starts to become binary where it's just one-sided, when it's just, there's always two sides to everything, is the beautiful universal principle of polarity, So with all these different things, it's like socializing is a skill set. It's a real skill set. And especially if you're pursuing something online, it's like we got to be able to put ourselves out there and to get in the room with people, whether that's a mastermind or whether that's something that is just a community-based thing where you're just connecting with people in person and you're building those connections, those real connections, with the right people, of course. And then, who knows, like travel then can become this really fun thing where you're not just going to places and living by yourself. And, I know for me as well, when I was traveling to some places and I was by myself, after a couple of weeks of like being around the city and like having that time in solitude, which is also really nice, by the way, but it comes to a point where you're like, this is kind of boring. I'm not going to lie. So the digital nomad life is very glorified in many ways, unless you have a big community around you, or you have, you're really good at like socializing as well. So that's a skill set that needs to be developed, especially in the modern day, because if we go back many years, it was a natural part of our growth was just to be around people. So we didn't have to think about that skill set. It was just something we had. But now in the modern day, we're more disconnected than ever just because of the nature of technology, the nature of social media. So we got to be able to take a step back, realize what's going on and see that, hey, okay, things have changed. We need to adapt to this, which means that we need to actually now put ourselves out there into scenarios where we are socializing and we're not hoping that all of the things that we want come from the online consumption, whether it's content or whether it's dating or whether it's just connecting with people. We crave deeply within our own soul the connection with another human being. And this is not just friendships. This is also romantic relationships, right? There's nothing more beautiful than connecting with a woman in a way where you're in person and fully present with them in that way. You can't get that through a screen, like you never will. And that's really what your soul craves, at the deepest level. It's far beyond what we think in terms of aesthetics or we think in terms of just like, getting with people or whatever the case is. So it goes across the board. So I think the overall message with this is really to see socializing as a skill set, as something to develop. And I'm telling you, like, even when you're in that gray area where you've maybe outgrown some of the old friendships and you're trying to find your tribe, like, man, I get you. It's a difficult place to be. You're in the gray zone. You're kind of like, you're not really over here anymore. You're kind of maybe still connected a little bit, but you haven't really found your tribe yet. Even if you're established and in business, right? It's still difficult to find these people. That may only be a handful of people. So I'd invite you to just build the skill of putting yourself out there into ways where maybe you're connecting with people on Instagram and maybe there's someone in the location as the same as you and you reach out to them and you just meet up with them, right? It could be simple as that. It could be getting into a mastermind or a community where you have to buy your way in, right? That could be it, because that you're going to get around some cool people there, especially if the values are aligned, right? It could be something like that. Some of my best friends and mentors have come from those scenarios, right? Where I would work with people on a one-on-one basis or in a group setting. And I would actually become best friends with the mentors that I have, and I would meet up with them in person. Like an incredible mentor that I started working with 2 years ago was Dan. He's actually here from New Zealand, and I'm in New Zealand right now, and he's actually become a very close friend of mine. So there's all of these different things that we can do within our own life to put ourselves out there, but especially in the modern day, like this has to be a conscious effort, not something we think is going to happen, because naturally, if we don't address these things, that we'll just unconsciously buy into the patterns of thinking everything is online and all the answers are online, when really, offline is like the new luxury, right? It really is. And when we start to bring conscious awareness to developing the skill set, not only will we be able to travel and have a unlimited earning capacity, but also then have the skill to be able to connect with different people in different places and to build that social aspect as well. So yeah, hopefully this message was helpful. But dude, I see you. Right, it's not easy, especially when you're walking the path, and whether you're starting off or whether you've been doing it for a number of years. It's a challenging thing, man. It's a challenging thing in the digital nomad life, especially when you're just getting started or you're just getting used to being in new places all the time. It's glorified a lot of the time, right? Nobody really actually sits on the beach with their laptop. It's one of the most annoying things that you could ever do. It's like you see these pictures of like people on the beach with their laptop. It's like, dude, nobody does that. Nobody does that. It's horrible to work at the beach, because it's like the sun just blocks the screen. So, all these things we just have to take into consideration as well, dude. But I see you. It's not easy, but developing the skills to be able to put yourself in those social scenarios will really fuel that connection that you really want within your own soul. So hopefully this message was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.